So I don't know if you've been paying attention to comics recently. Plenty of other commentators have done hot takes on this. But a Marvel artist from Indonesia, Ardian Syaf, has been sneaking in references to political issues in that country, specifically anti-Christian political issues in that country, and references to Quran verses and so on in his art in X-Men Gold, issue number 1. It's a complete mystery where he may have gotten the idea that it was okay to put explicit, overt political messages in the comic. I mean, why would anyone think they could do that? I have no idea. But anyway, he seems to have been fired, which is good, as I think we can all agree putting this kind of political messaging into comics is bad, specifically in this case because it's essentially calls for bigotry and for violence. But it's not like politics is a mystery to Marvel. And I don't mean like the old days. I don't mean like how the X-Men was always an allegory for race relations in the United States. I think that kind of political commentary and political grounding and political world building, that all makes sense. You know, they were drawing on historical threads with Magneto and so on. That's kind of fine. Even when it's a little bit more on the nose in something like The Dark Knight Returns, that was removed from the main comic book universe. It was something different, even though it was also a commentary on Reagan's United States to an extent, and the runaway patriotism in the form of Superman and so on. But these things were done with a degree of class and style and talent that just seems to be missing from the current crop of socially aware comic books. So I don't think people understand the objections to this sort of thing. It's not necessarily that they want politics or whatever completely out of their media, whether it's computer games or whatever it happens to be, comics, movies, whatever. It's just that it's so overt and it's propagandizing. It's hard to get art out of evangelism or proselytizing an ideology to people. Yeah, it can happen. I'm a big fan of Soviet and fascist propaganda art, posters and so on from the World War II and post-World War II era. I think those are fantastic. They have a particularly great style to them, I think, even if the messages are terrible. But it's hard to get that. You know, it's hard to have music that has genuine heart and soul when all it's trying to do is make you be something. That's why Christian rock is so utterly terrible. And it's the same with this kind of thing. You can ground a work in politics, but if you do it in such a way that you're propagandizing to your audience, I think it tends to fail, and it tends to fail hard. In this instance, even, this guy seems to have been handled with a relative degree of kid gloves, even though he was fired. He was apparently summoned for a meeting without coffee, and things were discussed with him. If he had been, I don't know, someone I wouldn't have much sympathy for, like a traditionalist white conservative hiding misogynistic political messages or whatever into the comic, I doubt he'd have had that degree of courtesy. But because he's Islamic, I guess, foreign, member of a racial minority in the context of the United States, even though he lives in Indonesia, he seems to have been handled with a degree of kid gloves that just wouldn't be present for someone else being put in the same position, I don't think. But I want to go beyond commenting just on this, because plenty of other people have had hot takes on this. You know, I'm late to the party on this one. What I want to talk about is the hypocrisy that goes on in the social justice types. And that's the thing that really gets to me, is that hypocrisy. And it's really frustrating to me, because I know in order to be a hypocrite, you have to try to do the right thing, but fail. And so to an extent, I feel that we should be forgiving of hypocrites, because they're at least trying to uphold a value or to profess a value that supposedly they believe in, and hopefully we believe in, and then they're falling short of the mark. And, you know, that's to an extent to be expected. but it really pisses me off. So in this instance, we have a company that has been being overtly political in a really obnoxious and ham-fisted way for a very long time, and has essentially made that acceptable. They're backing away from that now, thankfully. Apparently it cost them a lot of sales and so on, or at least that's one interpretation of the comments, and so they're going back to fixating on storytelling rather than proselytizing ideology, which is a good thing. But they've been doing this for so long, and then someone comes along and within their comics professes a horrendous ideology that they don't like, but then I think much of what they've been proselytizing is pretty awful too. And rather than defend it, rather than go to bat for it, little wonder because they don't agree with it in this case. But it's a completely different story to the kind of overt politicization that's been going on otherwise. So there's an obvious double standard there. I mean, this is an extreme example, but they have said horrible things to people who don't agree with them in various ways. They've done these ham-fisted caricatures of political opposition and so on. I understand the temptation, but there is this hypocrisy there. One form of politics is okay and another form isn't. If you're going to open your work up to being a political organ, then why shouldn't this vile Indonesian fuckwit get to project his politics too? Why is that okay? And breaking the jaw of what's his name? One of the record absorbing man. Breaking his jaw isn't something that can be picked up on for his differing views on gender. It's like the whole punch a Nazi thing. Yeah, aren't you all supposed to be better than these people? And here you are advocating for violence. What? And so yeah, it's the hypocrisy that really gets to me, and it's why I end up fighting with and arguing with fellow left-wing liberal types more than I do with conservatives. Conservatives gonna conservative. I don't expect them to hold themselves to a better standard. We have different ideologies, and they seem to be fairly consistent in the way that they apply their ideology, unless they're anti-gay, in which case they often turn out to be fucking rent boys. But apart from that, they seem to be fairly consistent. But the left will often say one thing and do another. Like these arguments over Green Ronin's competition/hiring policy are still ongoing, and people seem to be completely incapable of understanding the point that if you're saying sexism is bad, but then you do something sexist in the form of a competition or a hiring policy, you're being a hypocrite. You'll find all manner of excuses that would normally be coming out of the mouths of the traditionalist right to say why this is okay. Oh, women are different. Women have a different point of view. You wouldn't accept that the other way around. I'm publishing the Gore RPG soon. If I put an advert saying only red-blooded, cisgendered, heterosexual BDSM enthusiasts need apply, and was serious rather than just taking the piss, I am sure there would be some kind of outcry and horror over it, even more than there would anyway with a Gore role-playing game. It's just this absurd double standard and failing to live up to the values that you profess. How can you badger someone else and demand that they be accepting of these things, that they eradicate sexism from in their company, that they embrace diversity and treat women equally, when you refuse to treat men equally, when you refuse to treat just about people are individuals. People seem to be so upset about the idea of meritocracy. They don't seem to believe that it can possibly exist, and that people in minorities for some reason need a boost up, as though they can't compete on a level playing field. It doesn't make any sense. It's not consistent. It's directly opposed to the very values that you are professing to have, and yet you can't seem to understand your own hypocrisy. I can't accept it. It's not right. We should hold ourselves to a better standard. The way to equality is to treat people equally, not as an infinite number of special cases? Do you have the talent? Why are your genitals relevant? Do you type with your schlong? No. Do you paint with your clitoris? No. It's whether your work is good. That should be the determiner. The amount of melanin in your skin doesn't determine how well you can play the guitar. None of this is relevant. Only your talent, only your grey matter, the stuff in your head. And yet people can't seem to apply that obvious standard or hold to a consistent ethic. And it's just infuriating and frustrating, especially coming out of the mouths of people who supposedly profess these same values. And when you say, hang on a minute, as you've been trained to, as they have done for ages, to call out injustice or hypocrisy or wrong-headedness whenever you see it. But when you call out when they do it, it's a different matter entirely. And yet they're the ones that have trained us, in a way, to point and object and to call out when we see something wrong. But they don't like it when it's them being called out. Sea lioning is just call-out culture that you don't like. But that's what gets to me about it all, is the hypocrisy. That is the main reason why I guess I end up focusing on the left, because we're supposed to hold ourselves to a better standard. We're supposed to extol and embody these values of equality and so on, and I don't see it happening, and it frustrates the living shit out of me. Zang.